the Biden administration doesn't have any interest in and is overruling the parliamentarians' ruling that $15 minimum wage has nothing to do with the budget, even though the CBO has scored it that it does. But let's put that aside for a moment. Chris Coons was on MSNBC claiming that he supports the minimum wage, but he voted against it, you'll recall, because he didn't like something about the Bernie Sanders bill. Let's hear him now.
The $15 an hour minimum wage is another one of those issues that's really important to people. I know that you are not for it at the moment and voted against it. But is that something that is a tenable position for a Democrat when Democrats have power and can make these changes for people, but are hanging on to the filibuster for what? To empower Republicans?
Let's be clear, Joy. I support raising the minimum wage. I support indexing the minimum wage. I support increasing the minimum wage and getting to $15 an hour. I had some concerns about Bernie Sanders' specific bill and how it raises the minimum wage that frankly got very little discussion about the impact of two provisions of it. I think we will get that done this year. And I've already been having conversations with folks in my caucus about how we can get that done this year.
Does she ask what the two provisions are, or are we supposed to just sort of like, hang here and just assume like, oh, well, the two provisions, of course.
Oh, yes. I'm going to hide behind procedure. I learned this from my buddy Joe.
Well, it's not procedure. He's saying there's specifically something in the bill. I'm curious.
I'm going to hide behind semantics that I'm not even going to really tell you about.
Provisions. There's two provisions. I'd be really curious as to what those two provisions are. If we can find out what Chris Coons' provisional problem is. But that said, I guess I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because I would not trust Chris Coons as far as I could throw him. Now, to be fair, I've seen him. It's not huge. I could throw him. I don't know how far I could throw him, but I could throw him. That was the end of the interview, I guess. We'll just leave it. Oh, as long as there's a couple provisions.
I have kind of a longer statement. Let's see if you can find I'll read it. We have to raise the federal minimum wage, but we have to raise it in a way that recognizes that some of our economic sectors, restaurants and hotels in particular, have been hit particularly hard. I'm looking at a proposal that would gradually increase the minimum wage over a number of years after this pandemic so that businesses can plan for it, families can plan for it, and we get to the point over a couple of years where folks who are adults who are working full-time are not in poverty. I think a basic principle is that any adult who's working full-time at a minimum wage job ought to be able to afford the basics of life, and $7.25 is too low, hasn't been raised in years, and I think we're ultimately going to come together. So yeah, he doesn't, I guess, talk about him here either, so it's kind of hard to, he says it hasn't been given a lot of talk, his issues, but he hasn't been emphasizing
talking about them. Right. Well, it sounds like the way that he's talking about that, it sounds like he wants some type of like exception for people under the age of 18. Right? You pick that up? And it sounds like, I mean, it's not, I got news for everybody. It's a 4-year plan to go to $15 minimum wage. My understanding too was that it was Biden's plan. Biden's plan was more aggressive than Bernie's. Maybe Bernie raised a different one as an amendment as opposed to the Biden one. But it's still, you're 4 years out until you get to $15 minimum wage, I think. And
I mean, we know the real reason is he was giving political cover to the no votes.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
But it would be nice if somebody who has an interview with him would say, well, what do you mean? What two provisions? But hope springs eternal. And I'm not getting into that business of having politicians on so that I can every now and then ask Chris Coons about two provisions. Somebody else can do that. I'm sorry. I'm going to drive myself insane.